Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. And welcome to the Agility Resilience Antifragility panel conversation in association with Agility Resilience and Antifragility 2022 virtual conversation that is happening next week, November 15th to 17th, hosted by both Antifragility Institute and Friends of Antifragility. So that being said, today we do have a power pack panel and we will discuss more on practical based experiences and stories of the panelists we have. So that being said, let's welcome our panelists. Hello, hi Adeline, hi Joe, hi Sai. Pleasure to have you folks on this panel. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi,
Hi,
thank
thank
you.
you.
Great to have you folks. So let's get started by having briefly introduce yourself, Adeline, Edjo, Sai. So let's introduce yourselves to the audience.
Okay,
Edlin, please.
ladies start first, right? Hi, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Adeline. I've been a marketer for most part of my career. In the process, I have also been certified myself as a coach, so I am also a certified coach. And currently, I am on a career break. Just launched my book, written a book on reinvent for 4.0 because I see that there's world that is changing so fast and so disruptive. So I thought it was something that I could use my leverage on my experience to share some insights to help to impact the people who needs it most. So that's where I am now. And over to you, Enzo.
Thank you very much. My name is Etso. Really happy to be part of this global initiative because we just discussed we're all in different parts of the world. I'm from the Netherlands. I'm now 41 and in IT since my 10th year. And this is my background. So I know a lot of experience in IT, and I noticed that IT itself is pretty solid and doesn't move that much. And a lot of things are happening around us. So I started interesting in anti-fragility and did my master's in 2020. I finished it and did some academic publishing on it. And November last year, I started my PhD on this topic. So I call myself an anti-fragility architect because I want to help people to become more resilient. I'm really happy for this initiative because this is a really young domain and we need to learn so much together. So again, thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure is
Excellent.
ours. Sai.
Thank you so much, Mudasir, and likewise, Adeline and Edzo. A pleasure to be with all of you. And I echo, if you will, exactly as there's a need out there, and there's a very young field, right,
Yeah.
in this space. So definitively echo the comments that have been made. Briefly, relative to my background, if you will, I'm a coach and a consultant. I focus, if you will, very, very critically on transformation and change and really helping organizations and partnering with them to reinvent, if you will, for lack of better words, to use Adam in the title of your book, if you will, very openly, their business model as well as their operating model and bring those into calibration. And I work with all the way from, if you will, strategy and business and leadership and culture and execution and technology, really to help them achieve an impact. The things that I focus on very, very critically is what I call the sacred triad, how people and organizations deal with reality, human nature, and their own identity very explicitly, and really help them foster a degree of awareness to achieve impact. As I mentioned, everything that I'll be sharing, if you will, very much is rooted, as I like to say, in practice and very much backed by theory. As I think when I met Edzo the first time and Adeline, as you and I talked, and I know Mudis here, I always like to say I've been doing this too long. 40 plus years is already too long for me. So I need to get out of this game, if you will, at this point. So what I'll be sharing, very much so, theory-driven practice and practice-informed theory, and that balance and that dance. And likewise, I've two references that I definitely will dip into: the Anti-Fragility Edge, which was published in 2016, and Conscious Agility, published in 2013, with two dear colleagues, Brad Barton and Mark Ferraro. So very much looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Ever so quickly, my brief introduction. I am leadership and transformation coach. Majorly, I work with IT companies. I work with teams and leaders to identify opportunities and challenges in helping everyone to operate at their best. So great knowing each one of you, and then let's kick off our conversation of agility, resilience, and anti-fragility. So first and foremost, how do you differentiate between agility, resilience, and anti-fragility in your own words? Edzo, Adeline, who wanna go first, please?
Well, I can go first. I mean, to me, agility is being adaptable. You are fast to pivot when things go wrong. Resilience is, to me, it's just being able to withstand stress and not be broken, right? And anti-fragile takes it to another level. You are not just, not being broken, but from each inflection points, you actually comes out a lot stronger. So that's my definition of anti-fragility.
Yeah, nice. I have almost the same, but with a little nuance. So that's nice for the dialogue. Else we just say the same thing, right? So for me, resilience is responding to things that happen. But I also see that it's a part of resilience on becoming stronger for something. And for me, and fragility is that you're optimized to doing that all the time. So it's the optimization of resilience. That's how I like to frame it. And for me, agility is a way to improve the resilience. And I think there are other ways to do it, and more comes to it, I think. And that's how I try to stretch those meanings a little bit. But they're all words, and we are all free to play with them, right? So that's what I like.
Definitely. I like the stretching and the nuance, exactly, because the devil's in the details, as they say, exactly to those points.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Edzo. Did you have more,
and
Edzo, or you
yeah,
good?
but because discussing the details, we go a little bit deeper and find out why we use it, and then in the end, we basically all mean the same, right? But it's finding the nuance together that's nice.
Yeah. Discovering the nuances, exactly. If I stretch it a little bit further, if you will, I kind of look at reality as really a collection of tensions. And as you kind of work with the tensions, we all talk about order and disorder and all those facets. It's really the overlap, right? The in between, the edge of chaos, as we historically have called it. That becomes very interesting. And then those tensions really are experienced as stress in one form or another. And this is, I think, very, very central to really the key concepts of agility, resilience, and anti-fragility. I think in addition, there's been a lot of confusion, to say the least, because definitively Taleb's work is not the easiest to read, as we all know. And then, people do different things and what have you. But if I look at those three elements as really muscles, then we can work with them from a stress perspective as muscle fibers, right, that come together and allow us to work in the world. I'm going to add a few nuances exactly to build on what the two folks have said. I think the first thing to note, really relative to those concepts, is they're not absolute, right? They're not absolute concepts, but they're properties, if you will, of an object, of an entity. It could be an individual, a team, an organization. So they're properties. They're not absolute. So I actually avoid the word agile or anti-fragile, but I talk about greater or lesser agility and anti-fragility and resilience versus just absolutes. They're degrees on a spectrum, and they're relative to a given situation. Additionally, I think the power is recognizing what the source of stress is, right? The range of exposure, right? The acuteness of that stress and recovery time. So, I mean, these are some of the nuances, I think, that exactly as already sort of rendered. If I'm gonna just give the taglines and we can get into a lot more detail. But as I look at agility, which is rooted in Boyd very specifically, if you will, it's reactively embracing change in a world of order. So there's a lot in that statement, if you will. It's responding to change. It's very, very key. It's adaptability as the main mechanism for it. It's also having an affinity for order. That's why you're dealing with change from order, and you're being reactively open to and adapting to change. And we kind of look at those sort of nuances as I look at them. If I look at resilience, let me actually go to anti-fragility, then I'll come back to resilience. If I look at anti-fragility, based in Taleb, of course, is the key source there. I look at as proactively seeking disruption in a world of disorder. So kind of the other side of it, right? Versus agility on one side of it. And you need both, by all means. But it's growing from disruption, I think, similar to what Edzo and Adeline have already mentioned. And the key engine is evolution. It's evolvability as the primary engine in what I've experienced, again, from a very practical perspective. Additionally, there's an affinity to disorder. So you actually push yourself for that growth. It's not simply just like a muscle. You push yourself, right? You go to the gym respectfully, right? You push yourself to improve that muscle. And then it's proactively wanting. So it's not a reactive, but a proactive wanting and a seeking to evolve from disruption. Then if I look at resilience, as we look at resilience sort of as a balance between the two, it's really recovering from change and disruption toward continuity. And continuity tends to be the key factor in various ways. So we look at it as recovering from change and disruption. Recoverability is really the main engine. And then, if you will, having an affinity for that continuity is a big factor. And exactly, I think, as Edzo and Adeline have really mentioned already, it's reacting or recovering from what impacts that continuity, whether it be change or disruption. So they play well together, but the devil's in the details, exactly as Edzo and Adeline are emphasizing.
Yeah, that's what I liked about I found a literature study from Martin Brain on this, and he stated that resilience has many meanings. So he said there's no conclusive definition, and therefore he provided with 3 definitions. And he stated there's a difference between absorbing and coming back to your normal. So more like being robust in the end, but with a bit of wiggle room.
Yep.
And my translation of that is that's the ability to dampen the influence from the outside. But what I found interesting is that now we connect all the companies together, all the systems together, and it's an like you said, it's infinity what's exposing us.
Yeah.
And the third definition of Martin Brainy said there's also the resilience where you give more freedom to the system to do different stuff, and that's the only way that you can respond to things that are more out there, so that you can react and change your behavior. And I think, and especially now we have so many coaches in the call, I think that is the trick, because you cannot predict change in a person, or you cannot predict what the need of tomorrow is. Perhaps a Steve Jobs can, but we're not all Steve Jobs. So we should find a way that we can respond in advance by triggering ourselves in creativity or other stuff. And I find that really interesting. That's where, because my background is computer science, so that is reductionistic look at the world and predicting all these special things, but that's limiting, I think.
Yeah. Adeline, did you have a thought or relative to what Edzo shared, or can I add something after you?
Well, I think resilience is really just withstanding the shock, especially, but nowadays with disruptions happening more often, right? Change is no longer constant; it's exponential. You've seen that happening, driven largely by the global megatrends. Such as geopolitical tensions, as well as aging population, climate change, and Industrial 4.0, right? And of course, not to mention the black swan events like COVID-19. And all these, the confluence of these factors actually accelerate the change. And therefore, the term anti-fragility is so relevant, because it means that we can't avoid disruptions, right? We need to find a way to become better out of this inflection points. So there are many examples out there of companies, as well as individuals, as well, or even countries, governments, who have been anti-fragile, right? Because they don't just regress, or they don't just maintain status quo, but they actually come out from each crisis even stronger.
Yeah. And my question would be to, sorry, Yessi, yeah.
I'm sorry, Edzo, because I want to echo what you both said. Actually, I think it's very powerful. One of the key distinctions that captured my attention, quite honestly, with anti-fragility is removing the emphasis on prediction. So that's the key thing. Is really saying, agility and resilience, we try to predict in some way, but anti-fragility, fundamentally, you can't, if you will, predict the future, especially given some of the considerations. So rather, you can't be anti-fragile to everything. And it was the perspective that was introduced. And at that point, then essentially, well, we can only predict so much, and there are things that we can't predict, aka the response to the black swan, in a sense. And that was a very, very key distinction, if you will.
Yeah, and that would also be my question to you guys, because it's not my field of expertise. But so for me, anti-fragility is about responding what we don't know, and what we don't know is exceedingly increasing because there's more knowledge out there than we can fathom and more events than we can predict. Um, do you guys have a certain reflection on what helps people to embrace that unknown and to deal with it?
Mm.
Perhaps Adeline, because you all are more on the experienced in that field than I am.
Well, I think firstly, it starts with the person's intrinsic motivation and drive to want to succeed as well, and to get better. I mean, just this is just at an individual level, right? But if you look at, I always like to use Singapore as a reference because I'm a Singaporean, and if you look at 1965 when Singapore was being kicked out of Malaysia, our then Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew could have. He made the most of the situation. You can't change that, right? And he actually galvanized people. Put in place the blueprint, put in place the right people, and in less than 50 years, we moved from a third world country to a first world country. And of course, along the way, we had many disruptions, right? With the Asian financial crisis, with the dot-com crisis, and obviously, Singapore being an open economy is more susceptible to such disruptions. But because the government had insight, that we need to survive because we are so dependent. We've got no natural resources. So because of economic interventions, because of the discipline and cadence, and the vision, right, of what we as a country want to achieve, and that's how we always come back from each crisis even better. And we knew that after the Asian financial crisis, we are not just going to depend on financial industry, financial hub, right? We actually built a lot more industries. We invited investors to come and invest in Singapore, and now we have got the biomedical
Yeah.
science. We have got research. So just learning from that at the macro level, right? How countries actually as anti-fragile and take it down to the individual levels is really the drive to want to succeed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is that something in Singapore was already part of the culture, or is it something that people have learned each other in school or in families, or uh, can you reflect on that, how that existed? Because I, um, I can imagine that not everybody has it from nature in them to see these opportunities and have this drive. Or
I, Well, I guess it's at that time it's leadership. I wasn't born
okay,
yet at that time, but it's really the leadership to survive, and it's and that message gets instilled in us, right, through the education system and all that. But having said that, there are still individuals. I mean, I have been a coach and I've coached people back to work, who are unemployed back to work, and I've seen in them the mindset, right? The mindset makes a difference in them being successfully getting back to work or being successful in their career.
Yeah.
nice.
If I add to that, there's two characteristics. Thank you both for the question and the commentary, because I think there's two characteristics that are very evident, exactly, Adeline, that you called out in the historical perspective, right? And then also from a coaching perspective. And I continuously find these from interacting with organizations and individuals and teams. One is really having the confidence, if you will, exactly as described. If people do not, excluding the foundation below that, but if people don't have the confidence, it's very difficult to really move toward a more respectfully anti-fragile perspective. And then really having the courage. And the confidence is one aspect. The courage is the other one. To the courage, it's really risk taking. This is the push, and really skin in the game. And that's very, very key. So those are very explicit characteristics, exactly to your question, Edzo, that are both coachable and observable.
Thank you, Sai, for elaborating that, and Adeline bring in very unique perspective, right from individual to all the way to the nation. That's quite powerful. So, Edzo, do you have any experiences or stories that you would want to share with us?
Yeah, a few. The most recent one is I'm currently a lecturer in the course Enterprise Architecture at the Applied Science University. and I try to teach people what enterprise architecture means
Mhm.
as a capability. But we try to inspire them with the book from Ross about the digital transformation, and it's about letting go. So Jean Ross, she's a really really good thinker. She has written a really good book about, in a non-technical way, how to enable an organization to create a platform for possibilities. And most people in the Netherlands, and I think in Europe, but small lens, we have learned to identify and logical reason how things should be as a formula, but we don't are not learned to think in creating platforms for other people to grow on. And we try to educate people a little bit in this, to let them experience that you should not have to control the end result, as in, this is the value I want to create, this is the solution. No, you should enable the fertile ground for other people to find their solution in. So just like in Singapore, there were from the government a lot of things done to create the
Mhm.
environment for people to grow and take their chances. And so I try to do that also, but I'm just starting as a lecturer, so I need to learn a lot. So I really like this, but I think that is a way to create antifragility, to switch your mindset, not in reducing the options and going to a product, but creating value for creating opportunities, and
Mhm.
enabling the variety that's out there. Because I think that's in the end becoming anti-fragile. And that's also currently at the client where I work. It's really, I will not name names, but they are really good in producing a product. But to deal with bigger complexity, some domains you should let go and give the smart people the opportunity to grow. But the biggest discussion is, in which domain are you going to do that? And therefore you have to have the conversation about how is the domain, laid
Mhm.
out. I think that's a very valuable conversation anytime, to exchange how you look at the world, and and how to deal with
Yeah,
it.
and just to add on to what Ed so say, right? I think also the mindset of fail fast and learn fast. This is something that a lot of startup embrace. I used to work for a startup, and now I actually do consultancy work for startups. And your ability to celebrate failures and not just be of being discouraged by that, right? And be able to
Mhm.
learn from it. So I would
Mm-hmm.
say, to be anti-fragile, you need to be agile and resilient, agile enough to be able to adapt and pivot when things are not going right, and obviously, especially when letting go of the past, like what Ezo say, right? And resilient is really knowing that you need to bounce back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, great. And if I may ask another question, so it's a you can say that this can be applied to any domain, you and then if I connect that point to what Adeline mentioned about how Singapore has evolved all that, and then Adeline honed in on maybe the kind of leadership back then who saw the future and how to grow. So any practical advice or how to combine anti-fragility and leadership, and that is something a lot of our audience might be looking at leadership in whatever the domains they are, how they want to be a great leader and how to
Yeah.
be anti-fragile. So any thoughts, insights, please?
I, during my thesis study, I had a conversation with the coach, and he helped organizations to shift from the controlled structure to a more decentralized group structure. And he said all the leadership there needed to have a talk with the psychologist or a coach, because they needed to learn to let go.
Hmm.
And I think this is the most impactful conversation I had during the writing of my thesis on, um, you really should have in-depth conversation with people about that shift in mindset. And
Hmm.
not all the people have this. So therefore it's not realistic to demand it from everybody to become there. And you should be really conscious about talking about being anti-fragile, because it's really impactful on the people. So for the leadership, I think you should take responsibility on how to communicate it and what to ask from everybody, because anti-fragile also needs a stable, predictable body. Not
Mm-hmm.
everything should be loose ends, and some persons like the stable body more than the fast-paced, nothing is certain domain. And I think that's the takes a bit of maturity in the leadership and responsibility to make that right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's mainly my reflection on that.
Adeline,
I
Sai,
think
do you?
I think the ability to take risk as well. That is also part of anti. To be, I think it's one of the characteristics of being anti-fragile, because you need to. If you don't take risk, is a risk by itself, right? And when you take
Mm-hmm.
risk, when you actually do something, you learn from it, and every risk comes with potentially a failure as well. So to my point,
True.
earlier point about learn fast, fail fast, and learn fast.
And the interesting part is that for some person, what is feels like a risk is for somebody else something really certain. So I'm now in a security company as consultant, and friends of mine from their childhood were learned to walk into a building and walk out and do not care about the ribbons out there. And I was taught a ribbon means stay away.
Yeah.
So for me, approaching a ribbon for me is stressful, is risk. For them, it's daily. They don't even see it anymore, and that's also really interesting to have the conversation about
Mm-hmm.
what is risk and what is known or unknown, because it's so unique per person. And there you can leverage also that part. So as Adeline said, if you have somebody that likes risk and likes to fail, or is skilled in that, you can use that to learn together or to position yourself in a better position.
Yeah. I think there's I think both of what you mentioned are very, very key. Both of you. I think it's definitively, a lot of people think it's chaos. It's not chaos, because there are elements of stability, if you will, in the instability. So
Mm-hmm.
definitively it's not chaos. And I think the key words that you both mentioned, likewise, maturity is a big factor. That's a very, very big factor. And then additionally, the risk of, as I say, the risk awareness is very, very key. To Adeline, your point, being risk aware of where we take risks that will not compromise our survival, but actually allow us to thrive is very, very crucial.
Yeah.
So being risk aware, right? And then being risk savvy. To make it very practical, I always challenge leaders, and I say, at the most basic level, independent of groups and teams and collectives, at the most basic level, look at the conversations you have, if you will, look at the relationships that you have, and look at the behaviors that you exercise. If you look at those three core pieces, and this is actually in chapter 2, actually, if you go to the book, but those three core pieces, now ask yourself, right, which ones of these are actually giving me stability? Which ones are ones that I can push the envelope, right, in terms of being risk aware? Or what relationships don't I have that cause me risk? And then how do I kind of look at all those learnings and begin to take more risks in order to build a broader muscle? Very, very quick example. I've worked with executives, and they're so removed, right, from the ground floor, right, extremely removed from the ground floor. So I do something very simple. I invite them into a meeting at the ground level, right? They come into the meeting and they get very uncomfortable, right,
Mm-hmm.
because they're out of their element. At that point, they begin to recognize, wait a minute, what am I experiencing? Stress. Okay, what am I missing? They begin to recognize what's there. Then I pull them back out, and they quickly realize that there's value in getting closer to some things and away from other things. So very, very practical sort of techniques to exercise stress.
Quite powerful. Great. So, anything that surprising or interesting, and based on what Sai said, Edzo, that caught your attention, Adeline, anything that you want to ask or explore further?
Well, one of the parts of my, I don't know if you all know the Kneffin model of Dave Snowden.
Yep.
But he divides. No, he doesn't like division because it's to consultancy. Um, but what fascinates me about the Kneffin model or framework is that it's on an individual basis, but also it helps you to move around. So if somebody feels he or she is in an ordered system and you move them into an unordered system, and since it is personal, the example of Sai is more than enough. You can let people experience what's going on and also let them experiment in a safe way with the capabilities we know that are there. So at a current client, I have many clients at the same time, so that's easy. uh, we are in a domain where something doesn't happen, and for a long time. And I approach it as a complex domain issue and even a chaotic domain because I don't know what's going on. Let's approach this now from complex to chaotic, and I just do stuff. And now things are happening, and I can now slowly move the problem into complex. And then when people mature and get owner of the problem, then we can move it to the complicated part. But I didn't want to discuss anymore, just act. And these things are so powerful that you notice, okay, for me, this problem is in this domain. No, then I should just act. And as long as you keep the conversation going, you at least can align as a group. Do we accept that this is chaotic, non-predictable? Yeah, okay, then we act. And when it becomes a little bit of pattern recognition and going on, then it's more safe and you can go to complex. And that's what I now, since I've have this understanding of this model, I try to apply it in my lessons and my clients, and I think it's really powerful. Be really conscious, but you should keep the dialogue going, as she said, because else you might confront people with something they don't like, and then harm is done, and then relationship is gone.
Yeah, so I have a question, right? And I just want to pose to everyone here. How do you think the concept or this trait of anti-fragility can be imparted to the younger generation? Especially now, the COVID-19, a lot more disruptions. In the last week, we saw a lot of retrenchments from tech companies, right? And some of these people are very young, in the 20s, and they're exposed to a lot of bad news. How do we, as parents or even educators, right, inculcate their trait from young?
So, I like the question. I would say for
Great
me,
question.
yeah, super. It's I don't know what the good thing is, but I do know what in retrospect, I think. So I'm around 40. So what my generation and the older generations did wrong, we removed a lot of people from the pain. So the skin in the game we reduced. We added a lot of layers of bureaucracy in the Netherlands. I don't know it's in the rest of the world, but in the Netherlands we added institutes that fixes things by a lot of different departments, and we try to fix it as a big thing. And that created a not humanistic machine. And solving an issue was really difficult because nobody was exposed to the pain and didn't have the skin in the game to really make the change. And I think that is not a good way to deal with big problems. So we marketed, how do you call it? Made our healthcare commercial in 10 years. And now it's so divided in different organizations that everybody thinks, yeah, but this is impossible to change. But we did it in 10 years, so why not change it? And that absence of skin in the game, I think that is something I would emphasize to other people. That was not a good thing of us to do, that we did. That was a big mistake. How to fix it, I don't know. So I can't answer your question on that, but I can tell this was our mistake. We boo-booed it there big time.
And I think it's a great question, Adeline. An incredibly good question, actually. And I'll mention a reference as well as comment on it, because my daughter now, she's almost 30, but very much so when she was younger, as she was growing up, really focused on agility, resilience, and anti-fragility in particular. But one of the key things, I'll build on what Edzo said, and I'll circle back around to her specifically with examples. We have removed exactly so much skin in the game under some other label. One of the big labels is actually psychological safety. If you look at psychological safety, it actually, if misapplied, if you will, or even if applied with the proper intent, actually removes skin in the game, which can cause a lot of fragility to manifest. So there's a big connection between psychological safety, to be very brutal about it and honest about it, and skin in the game. What we should do is build strength. The world isn't safe. The world is never going to be safe, if you will. So by building strength, you actually create, if you will, a degree of psychological safety, and likewise a degree of dealing with the world. So those are, so thank you for calling. So thank you for the question. Likewise, Edzo, thank you for the commentary on skin in the game. The other piece of it is, how do we help children take risks, if you will, and become aware of the risks they're taking in a way that they're going to survive and thrive, so we don't compromise their survival.
Yeah.
So as a quick example, my wife, if you will, when our daughter was very, very young, she was respectfully overly protective. Don't let her go near the pool because she may fall into the pool, or because she may not know what to do relative to the pool and just, whether accidentally or intentionally, go into the pool. So being left with my daughter at that point, I essentially just watched her, but let her explore, right? If she would get too close, because children are naturally curious, very naturally curious, and they're very creative. So she would naturally explore, but I was always keeping out to ensure her survival. That helped her build the creativity muscle and the curiosity muscle to help her begin to look at other things as she got older. So that's one thing, but amongst many, many other things. But we have to look for opportunities. That's really the kicker. And if I can recommend one book, if you will, and he does talk about respectfully, the authors talk about anti-fragility. There's a book, The Coddling of the American Mind, which very much ties into this piece of the conversation. Highly recommend it. And I believe there's a chapter in there on anti-fragility as well, relative to some of these things. But we see it in schools, right? We see it across many, many domains.
And yeah, I just want to build on what Sid say, right, about safe psychological safety. It's just give an analogy like trampoline, right? We do not want to provide like free, like government context, countries context as well, right? Giving free social services that people do not want to work for it, but giving them the safety net so that even if they fail, it's okay. There's a safety net, and they just bounce back better, right?
Yeah.
So what is interesting, if you will, what is interesting is if you look at skin in the game. Skin in the game is a very interesting concept. The purpose of skin in the game is actually evolution, and the term that Taleb actually uses is filtering. So there is a filtration through skin in the game for things that can survive and things that do need to pass. So that is very, very key to evolution. If we create a safety net for everyone, we societally, as a human race, will become excessively weak. So there's a very delicate balance to be found across all that.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
And so also, if you look at anti-fragility, the trick is to have a safe base from which you can explore, and that if you fail, you don't go bankrupt, or in this case, you don't die. And that's the safety net Adeline is talking about, which we should configure. But you should have the confidence to experiment and have that 10x increase. But if it fails, you're not, and that trick, because then you take away that anxiety to the core, but still have the being nervous to learn.
Yeah.
And I think when you had your example of the children, I've a few godchildren, and what I noticed in the parents there, that they have more focused on attachment, as in being safe.
Yeah.
Let them explore, as you said. Let them cry. Let them experience, but be there all the time, so that they know they are so physically and mentally mature. That's incredible compared to, and that's what I find interesting, that we as a society also are non-stop learning from each other. Everybody's standing on shoulders. And that having that knowledge about attachment theory, that knowledge about what is safety, the knowledge what. So a lot of people have anxiety in itself, because you have flight or fight stuff. So what's that safety net? Is for everybody different, and how to deal, and which context do you then need for that to feel comfortable enough to take the risk, but also feel enough jitters to take the risk. And that's
it's very, very delicate. It's very delicate.
It's the nuance again. It's
Yeah, exactly. It's the nuance and the delicacy. Really, I mean, exactly as Adeline, you're looking at that safety and that net, if you will, and Edzo, as you're elaborating, the key words being survival, if you will, and thriving. You don't want to compromise someone's survival, especially if you don't have skin in the game. Let's put it that way. You don't want to compromise someone's survival, but at the same time, you don't want to overcompensate for someone or something. Let's put it that way, and ensure their survival when the reality is there may be other ramifications. So it's the whole filtering skin is so delicate. It's very, and this is why respectfully, as I like to tell people, if you work with coaches, right? And I myself as a coach as well, coach and a consultant, if you work with coaches, be careful who you choose. Stress in the wrong hands can be very dangerous.
it should fit your
Yeah.
and that's also I think and that's why I find this issue so interesting, because it doesn't have. So I was educated in topics that have a solution, and then you get your mark, or then it compiles and it's done. And this topic doesn't have one size fits all,
Exactly.
and that's also why why I love having all these conversations with different type of people, because we need to find a way to together find the mold that that you have a toolbox to select, and then the style of C fits this company, or the style of Adeline fits this company, or let's experiment. I think that is also survival and really good for it.
Well said. So, in terms of strength, and Sai, you talked about strength, curiosity, and creativity. So, is there any other means that strength can be developed beyond curiosity and creativity?
There's an infinite way to build capability, build competency, exposure to stress, exposure to the unknown, right? To uncertainty. If I give another example, I used to do a lot of presentations, if you will, not on Zoom or what have you. And the way that I used to test myself, quite honestly, is I would invite someone in the audience. I give them my phone. I say, choose any number. And they would choose any number. I would have no idea who it is. They would choose a number, and I would say, well, let's call that number, right, to introduce me. Now, that right there, right, puts a lot of stress on you in order to build the muscle of how you would introduce yourself. And at the same time, actually, whoever they're calling also puts stress on the caller to see what would happen and let them grow. So that's a very simple, so an infinite number of ways.
Powerful, quite powerful. Go ahead, Sai.
I was going to say, I would love to hear Edzo and Adeline yourself, kind of how, perhaps, from that example, perhaps, how are there ways that you sort of push yourself, for lack of better words, right, to achieve growth and achieve greater, anti-fragility? I'd love to hear sort of thoughts from both Adeline and Edzo.
I guess it starts with, to me, it's personal experience, just being curious, being willing to experiment. And I think as a coach, right, I always try to reframe myself. I think that helps. And not wanting to just being the best, right? Every day, just want to be better than where I was yesterday. So that kind of drives me, and also for me to strike a balance as well, because I it's important that we don't push ourselves overly hard. As we always talk about getting out of the comfort zone, right? You won't grow until you get out of comfort zone. How far do you stretch? I think the ability to strike a balance and giving yourself cutting yourself some slack does help you to bounce back better. Otherwise, you get burned out.
Yeah, that's a good advice. So until now, my coping mechanism was to always say yes. If something pops up, say yes, and then believe in the entropy and that things will happen, and that will expose me to unknown things, because new things will happen non-stop. But what I often forget is the strength part. So Part of the anti-fragile attributes are to have resources to invest, and that's not only money, but it's also time and energy.
Yeah.
And when you have time and energy, or like a philosopher said, when you have a room in your head you can breathe. So to solve a complex puzzle, just go and see a beautiful art piece or walk a little bit. Give yourself room to breathe in your head. That's also resources to invest. And I think that's again the balance nuance. Doing all the things nonstop will not let you grow. But if you take a step back and breathe a little bit and chill, then when the opportunity arises, you are more clear-headed and see different options that you would otherwise not see. I think that's the balance between being curious and stumbling, and having the strength and the mental ease to stay away. But that's per
Great.
person different. Eh?
Yeah, yeah. There's two. I love the emphasis from both of you, because there's, and we've called it out a couple times actually. There's two patterns, especially that I have found very powerful in practice, if you will. One of them is very explicitly around options and experiments, if you will. I call it the options experiments pattern, and this helps us identify opportunities and really to think as an entrepreneur, if you will, from that vantage point. And then the other pattern, and these have a natural tension with each other. The other pattern is really to be an explorer, where you are more independent, but at the same time be more redundant. So you can essentially begin to build that base of experience to allow you to really flourish. Those are very consistent patterns that I have discovered in practice. The first one I call the options experiments. The second one I call the independence redundance pattern. But they apply at multiple levels, and they're very powerful to help us grow and achieve greater anti-fragility. So
Well,
I really
yeah,
appreciate call outs.
I would take that to the another level. I just wrote a book. The title is called Reinvent 4.0. It's not a textbook reinvent, right? It's each of the letters stands for something. And when I put it together, it helps the persons become more anti-fragile. So R's, the first word letter, stands for risk-taking mindset, being able to take risk and knowing what your strategic trade-offs are. E stands for entrepreneurial thinking, which is what Sid have just said. I stands for inclusivity, being able to embrace diversity. That helps because it's important, right, to just widen perspective. N is noticeable, really placing yourself out there, being known for what you're good at. That gives you the confidence level as well. And the next letter is V, vulnerable. Being able to, I think vulnerable is not a taboo word. It's actually a strength. Knowing when to step back, knowing when to let go, and knowing when just be yourself, right? Be authentic. That will actually helps you to not go for the long haul. It's a marathon, right? If you try to fake it, how long can you last, right? This can be energy zapping. And then the last three letters stands for networking, building a network, because when you have a network of people to support you, I think that kind of, in a way, can be a trampoline for you to help you move to the next level. And E is empathy as well, being empathetic to people around you and to yourself, right? Self-care. And T is building is transdisciplinary skills, building skills that are from different domains, because increasingly you need to not be thinking linearly, being able to have integrative thinking, right? That is actually very helpful, because that also gives you the intellectual capability to help you bounce back.
Nice.
Yeah, good thoughts, definitely, Adeline. I love the way you said it, Nick. Take it to the next level. Believe me, I've taken it to the individual, to the group, and to the enterprise. So I'm with you. Yes, indeed.
Nice. All right. So, if you are all okay, let's dive into closing thoughts. Uh, great conversation, and you guys had good piece of advice to offer as well as the practical guidance to audience. So that being said, let's move ahead with closing thoughts. Adeline, it's Osai.
Well, I what I think is that it all starts with yourself. So Taleb states his examples are about self-employed people, but we both notice you need somebody around you. You need certain types to help each other. You cannot have all the skills, so you need a network. But in the end, it's how you, it's on to you as a person which position you take and how you deal with it. I and if you're gonna close yourself down and want everything to be predictable, I think then in the end you will have more stress than when you embrace the chaos and,
Mm-hmm.
and and decide for yourself how to position yourself and how to deal with it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that would be my closing advice to people. Uh, yeah.
Well, for me, it's really embrace the mindset of constant reinvention, because disruptions will be the new normal. It will happen, even faster or even more often, right? So being able to embrace that permanent that mindset of permanent reinvention will help you stay the course.
Excellent.
Oh,
Excellent.
it's fine.
Yeah, I definitely I appreciate the opportunity all around relative to the closing comments and the whole conversation. Thank you, Edzo. Thank you, Adeline, likewise, and thank you, Mudasir, for hosting. I think one of the key things that I would emphasize to folks taking out of this conversation, there's a lot to learn, right? There's definitively a lot to learn, a lot to explore together, and that's why these conversations in community are valuable. The one thing that I would really encourage folks to keep in mind is not to conflate concepts, right? Not to confuse, but truly discern, if you will, these concepts. They are distinct, they are unique, especially as we move forward. Understand the fundamentals, right, that we're building together, but they're not the same thing as what we've done historically, and then learn how to operationalize them together. So a lot of explorations that way. And I can give numerous examples where I think we've all seen that historically. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you, Adeline. Thank you, Erjo. If I may ever so quickly share my closing thoughts, it's all about reality, risk awareness, with a combination of these two, navigating the uncharted waters. So that's all helps one or organization or a nation to further grow. Thank you. Great talking to you. I'm sure our audience would have a lot of takeaways and they would have thoroughly enjoyed and with our enriched conversation. And we are pleased to have you. And that being said, please stay tuned. And we have our conference coming up on November 15th, 16th, and 17th. Agility, Resilience, and Antifragility 2022 virtual conference hosted by both Antifragility Institute and Friends of Antifragility. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for
Talk to
having
see you.
us.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
Thank you
bye.
very much.
Bye.
Thank
Ciao.
you.